I think, first of all, one of the things for me that when you talk about inclusion is not looking from inside our sector. It's looking at other groups and what they're doing and their sense of what community is, not our assumptions about community. And some of the things that bring to mind lessons I've learned, I think, are because I'm fairly active in the urban Aboriginal community, Aboriginal Days, and being at an Aboriginal Days event with my kids, and they had powwow dancing, and one of the kids that was a powwow dancer was in a chair, and that, like, I was quite surprised. And I know the woman that organizes the powwow dancing, so I went up to her and asked her, I was all excited about it, and her reaction was kind of a blank stare. Well, she said he wanted to be a powwow dancer, and it wasn't even an issue for her to include him. And I think that in our field we get really insular and we don't recognize that other people have very different views of things. And from her perspective, if it was a child that was interested in powwow dancing and she's trying to maintain a culture and a tradition, you welcome them. And all that had to happen was somebody had to say, this kid wants to be a powwow dancer. And for her, it wasn't even an issue. So recognizing that we need to respect what's going on in those other communities and listen to what they're telling us, as opposed to us going in and telling them what should happen for people. And oftentimes we think we need expertise to go into those communities, and actually it's more of an interest than an expertise. Other person I think of that is a fellow that was living up north, and he loved hockey, like crazy about hockey. And in a small town, that was like a lot of small towns in Canada, it was a big deal. And he was the biggest fan for his locals team, and he went to all the practices and went to all the games and stuff. Anyway, long story short, he ended up being the equipment manager for the team. But he also, because of his enthusiasm, he gets so wildly excited about games and was so supportive of the team, he'd get the crowd going. And again, they didn't bring him on as an equipment manager because he was a guy with a disability. They brought him on because of how he motivated the crowd and his clear love of the team. And I was doing some planning for him as a facilitator of planning for him in community, and this hockey team showed up. And I was quite surprised, and they weren't looking at it from the context of a guy with a disability. They're thinking about it as their equipment manager and wanting to come and talk about some of the stuff he's done, and thinking about how he's, maybe we could talk about some other ways he could be an equipment manager for us, like other things he could be doing for us and things like that. So their perspective on planning was completely different than what we traditionally do when we think about planning for people with disabilities. And that was really good for me. Like I went, right, yeah, this is a different perspective, and we need to be thinking more from that perspective and not the perspective of those supporting people with disabilities, but what's community look like, and where do people tie in? There was no professional involved in helping them connect to the team, and I'm not saying that's not necessary sometimes. Lots of times that's necessary, but I think the professionals that do that need to be mindful of that, the perspective from where you're going to, not where you're coming from, and what is the need of that particular place, people, environment. And is there a tie-in, as opposed to, will you help this person? It was like, this guy's got lots on offer, and he supported his team, and that's what they saw. They didn't see a guy with a disability. They just saw this amazingly enthusiastic, supportive guy that was always positive about what their team was doing. I think curiosity is a big part of welcoming communities, and being curious about who else is there. And I think about, because I'm involved, like I mentioned, in the urban Aboriginal community, and the organization that I'm involved in there makes a point of creating events where everyone's welcome, and like they'll do stuff like cultural days, things like that. It's not insular to just their community. It's exploring with other communities around how can we meet up. And so when, like, we're in Langley, Langley has their diversity days, and anyway, where a bunch of different cultures get together and they share their food and they talk about their traditions and stuff like that. So they're an integral part of that. And I think that part of that's the curiosity. Some of it is recognizing from their own experience feelings of isolation and wanting to make sure that's overcome for everybody, not just for their particular community. It's not just about them. I think about it even from the perspective as a parent, because I am a parent, and the stuff we've done around our son too. It's not, we don't think of it as joining so much for his disability as his interests. Like one of his passions is trains, and so it's quite interesting. My husband also enjoys, like, they're part of a toy train club, but Colby goes to that with my husband, and he's not there as the kid with a disability. He's there as a fellow lover of trains, and he's actually learning how to repair them and do all these things because he shows an interest. So instead of us going, we help the kid with a disability, it's like, well, this is something that there's a group of, and we're going to participate in it. And so it's not expecting there to be a remedial trained group or anything like that. It's just like, how can he participate? And a lot of the people I know that that are successful at that, and it's quite amazing to me some of the cool stuff they've done. I'm thinking of a family that lives on an island, and it's one of the more remote Gulf islands, and they've purpose-built a house for their daughters in chairs, and the community of that island is very artistic, and the first thing they built was an art studio before they sort of built the house in pieces and welcomed people in. So they have something that the community really values because they had this beautiful space and people were doing art when their daughters were doing art. So they were just part of their community. The acoustics in their house is complete now, are beautiful. And there's a choir on the island. And the choir now practices in their house. And they have their annual concert in the house. And it's just become part of the community. So they've married interests is what they've done. It's gone, yeah, this is something that we like doing, and hey, this could work in this house, why not do it here?